But
And on the publishing side, Australia, I mean, is that a disadvantage? Is there any challenges or would you be open to signing an Australian artist or
I definitely
writer?
I definitely would be. I also work, with our Australian office too, and I usually check with them to see if they're on something, if they're monitoring, or if I've already had a conversation with the artist. So I defer to them, as I would expect they would, if they were looking at something in the U.S. And that's how we operate with our UK office too. But I'm always looking. I mean, I saw a couple great Australian artists at CMJ, and I'm like I said, Wolfmother was signed, to a worldwide deal with us recently, last year. And the U.S. is very close to that. But I love the Australian music scene. I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting labels. We actually have a deal with Due Process through Australia, with a lot of great bands on there, and then of course Wolfmother and a lot of interesting other artists. But no, it's not a deterrent at all.
Say, David, you really liked an Australian artist. You heard something that was great. I mean, would you want to know what's going on with them there? What have they done there before they come here? Is that important? Like Heather talked about the Kids of '88. I don't know how much they have going on in Australia.
I don't think they had that much.
So they sort of.
It was more just like a song. It was a great song, great.
They didn't have a story there.
No, it was brand new.
Okay.
It would be icing on the cake for them to have a story.
Yeah.
I would prefer for them to bring more to the table than less.
Right.
So yeah. I mean, I would love to have a story. I'm always looking for, like I said, that confluence of those compelling reasons why you should do the deal.
Is there ever the notion like, well, it's not happening in Australia, why would it happen here? Does that ever would that be a thought?
It might enter my mind. I mean,
I think it's so far away. It's like snow. Like when I worked at K-Rock here, I always, it was such a huge deal. Like, from coming from radio, having radio play. So I know Triple J is a huge factor. If they have any sort of thing happening with that, it's a big push, on the label side here. Hey, they got a couple plays on Triple J. Oh, they're playing this festival there. They have a booking agent there. It's definitely all helps. But at the end of the day, I think it's all right place, right time. The song's great. It's new. Nobody's on it yet. Let's be first, kind of thing.
How about you? What's interesting is that sometimes there's totally illogical asymmetries in what works and where. There's certain American bands where the best move is to just go straight to England. And there's certain English bands that can be humongous everywhere but here. And I think that sometimes, that can happen with Australian bands as well, obviously. And then there's also American bands that do disproportionately better in Australia than they do here. And I think that figuring out sort of where the band's going to land, it's a little bit hard to do, but I think if you're a great band, it doesn't matter where you're from. I do think that when you identify sort of who you are and where you belong, there's an interesting thought process about figuring out where you start and where you make the first move. And I think one of the things that I really like about the Australian sort of musical community is that I think there's actually probably a more natural sort of link between how things do in Australia and how things do here than is sometimes the case with Europe. And certainly with Japan and other territories, it gets even harder to predict. But I think that there's a nice organic scene, especially on the rock side. There's a nice organic scene for just good bands in Australia, and I think that that's really a huge positive. I mean, obviously, if something has traction in Australia, that bodes well for what you could do with it here. But I also think there's Australian bands that may not be huge at home that could do well here. And I think historically there've been plenty that have been even bigger here proportionally than they were Australia. And then there's some, I still don't get why Empire of the Sun hasn't taken off.
Oh my
here.
gosh, that's the best.
I don't know if they've spent enough time here. I mean, that's often one of the problems. I think if you're trying to break internationally, the thing that always kills bands from the UK in the U.S. is if they're only willing to come over periodically or can only afford to come over periodically.
Totally.
Yeah.
They need to be here.
I think I'd be very wary to sign an Australian act that didn't want to move here.
Yeah, true. And I don't know why Lady Hawk didn't happen here. I loved Lady Hawk.
Oh, that's right.
What? Is that New Zealand? Whoopsie, sorry. Well, there's also...
Same thing?
What?
Not the same thing.
No, not the same thing at all. But there's so many great Australian bands that should make it here, but they Empire of the Sun, best song of the year. That was huge.
That's fantastic. We actually published Nick Littlemore, and Yeah, Empire of the Sun is a fantastic band, and I finally saw them. This is a great example. I know we're not going to go negative, but this is a great example of, I think, of what needs to change.
Realistic, I like.
Yeah, this is here's Empire of the Sun is a fantastic example, and it doesn't just have to be an Australian band. This is just what's happening in the States. That band has had fantastic sync opportunities, huge blog, buzz band. Everybody knows about them, and they played LA. The first time they played LA a few months ago, they did 5 nights sold out at the Fonda.
Yeah, huge.
Sold out. And it was
crazy.
one of the most amazing shows I've seen in a couple of years. It was unbelievable. And they've scanned, the record's been out a while, maybe 8, 9, 10 months, something like that, and it's scanned 30,000 albums in the States.
It might be because it was on an indie label under EMI, and they just didn't really push it at all.
Yeah.
I think that they just it was more like a single, blog love, huge, television presence, everything, but you don't need to buy the album because it's just, it's
Or
already
people stole
available. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's,
format.
Yeah.
the one song was so huge. The album was great, but, just the one song, totally, it was so huge.
Well, we are talking about labels and, of course, publishing.
Yeah.
But that being said, I would say, 5 nights at the Fonda, they're
man.
doing fine. They're a success.
great.
They've sort of broken through here.
Yeah.
Not totally on the mainstream, but you're a new band. You're in Australia. How do I get your attention, you folks? What do I do? What do you look for? What can I do? I'm in Australia. Obviously, I say you have to get out and play and be a band there, be an artist there. But what would you sort of tips or to get your attention?
I think it's the same earmarks that we look for here.
Okay.
Acts that have built some of it, or a lot of it. In terms of their internet presence, in terms of their touring base, in terms of their fan base, in terms of the record, the quality of the songs.
Yeah,
the record.
So let's talk about internet. Now, a few years ago, MySpace was, we're talking the social network was an important indicator of looking at plays and visits, and is that still that important?
It's
That-
one.
or is
It's,
that an
it's one
indicator?
of 10 or 15 different places where they should have big exposure.
So
Yeah.
what are some other ones that you would say are indicators or things online where, how about YouTube?
YouTube, I think, is great. I think the video component is always a huge thing. If they can make a really clever video for no money, it can't be beat. It's going to get passed around all the blogs, and I just really think that MySpace is so important still, because I know if there's ever a band I find in a blog, that MySpace is the first place I'm going to go, because the format's so simple. Where Facebook, I'm confused, kind of where's the management contact, where's this, whereas MySpace, it's here, this is if they're on sign, here's the songs, here's their, so they definitely still need to have a MySpace page, even if they don't use it as much as they used to. So, but I would say try to have a great song first and foremost, and then also have play some good gigs at great venues, but also just pass it around to all the blogs that are really cool and try to get them to write about you. Because you don't need a publicist for that. You can just submit it to each blog
And well, let me ask you. So of course you have to do great music. You put it up there. Someone's got to find out about it. So you definitely recommend you have to work it too. Mm-hmm. Use the social network to spread your music. Spend time on there.
Yeah, Twitter especially. Just get a whole fan base going. On your own. Because if you don't have fans at the end of the day, it's who's gonna come and see you.
Good thing too, I'll say, and this is true worldwide, but I think it's really important, and people don't talk enough about it. Look, if you're a new artist, it's not going to be easy to talk your way onto the big day out or to talk your way onto sort of other platforms. But what you can start to do is really network with other artists, and the hang between bands is really underrated as a business networking tool. If there's an American band that you like that's playing a club in your city, and you can go and kind of get a hang going and maybe play, give them some music to take home and stuff, that propagates really quickly, and you might find that the next time they come back, they want you to open the show in that city for them if they hit it off with you, or if or if they just your music sat with them, and that's not just true of American bands, obviously, and if you can start to develop relationships with other bands, both bands that are coming through and bands that are local, there is a tendency for bands to bring each other up and to put each other onto their representatives' radar and their publisher and their label people's radar, and
totally.
and that's something you can do without having to break down a door and get a gatekeeper to sign off on you. That's just sort of being an artist and being cool with other artists. And that's, that's a big deal, I think. And something you can start with like right now,
Yeah.
Become their Australian friend.
And become really good friends with the bookers of venues, because that's so invaluable to make sure that you can get that opening slot of the headlining act that you love, that you go really well with. Just making sure that you're really that your area of town and know what gigs are coming up, that you can ask, hey, that so and so band is coming to town, do you have an opener yet, or do you have a first opener? If I think it's always great to ask, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Sure.
Just bug the shit out of bookers in a nice way.
How important are, would you say, things like the music conferences over here? South by Southwest, CMJ, Music Expo. These are showcases. Do you recommend taking a shot, getting on one of these? Are you going to come over here and get discovered on something like that? Realistically.
There's a long shot, but it's
highly unlikely, but possible.
So
yeah,
is
exactly.
it maybe
it's
better?
possible.
I mean, those things aren't the magic, the magic ticket.
Not as much anymore, because they're getting so big that it's like finding a needle in a haystack there too.
It's a good way if you've already got people who are looking at you and talking to you. It's a good way to get a lot of people in the room from a lot of different places at once.
That's true.
The joy of South by Southwest is you can have England, Nashville, New York, and LA, and
UK,
and Perth, and everyone's all in the same room potentially, but they got to know to go to that room. And if you're just one of 5,000 bands swimming around town, that won't happen. But if you've got dialogue going where you think that like it might be a place where you can get some traffic, then it can be really invaluable.
Yeah, if you have some interest, definitely go.
And if you have a record done, if you have your stuff together and you're presenting it and you're looking to get publicity and once you have the story going. I said when I worked at BMI, just as Austria, you guys do a South by show. When I worked at BMI,
Oh yeah.
the same
BMI
thing,
is the APRA equivalent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. They it didn't make sense to just go to South by to try to get signed. It's like if you had your stuff together, it was going to be more impressive to every label anyway, and you have a story coming in, and the ball is already rolling. But to just get signed and have a record done, and it's tougher and tougher these days.
Yeah, I think your work for South by starts three months before you get to South by, if not longer. In terms of to go without your team set up seems like a big waste of money. To go without a finished record and really preparation for meetings, because your 20-minute set, your 30-minute set comes and goes like that.
Yeah, and the people that you want to meet with probably won't be at that show. There's so many shows to go to, and most of the time it's a huge headliners now instead of, that's where everybody's at instead of going to like the little shows. You should have like 3 or 4 shows set up at least, trying to.
So if you get a gig at one of those events, do you want to try to build as many things around it as you can?
Yeah, as many times.
One thing I recommend is, it's also very expensive to go and to bring the whole band and for even the application to submit, but to go to those things as just sort of an attendee and see what it's like. Meet other bands, get a sense of what the competition is like. Send maybe your lead singer or pool your money and whoever the lucky band members to go and see it and make friends, right? And
whoever the band member that's the most networking, it's like a job to go there.
And with all that said, if you're lucky enough to get on the Australia stage, I mean, that's awesome. Then of course you do it. But if you're just going and going to be, off the 6th at midnight on a Saturday night,
Yeah.